We hate to lose these stories of early time aviation. So Topper, I will ask you some questions and try to remember some of the wonderful things that were happening or any exciting things that were happening at that time. What sparked your interest in aviation?
Well, I was in college, and I rode down to the local airport with my girlfriend and her boyfriend, who was taking flying lessons. And they asked me if I'd like to take a ride, and that started it, and I loved it. And so I took all my spending money and spent it on taking flying lessons.
What year was that?
Oh, 1938, I think. I'm not real sure. 38, I think so.
Do you remember your solo?
No, I remember it, but I don't know what date it was. But it was a normal sort of time it would take to, when you're hard up for money and trying to buy flying time. It takes a while to get it, but I got it in a few months.
Do you remember what kind of an airplane?
Oh no, soloing was quick. I was thinking of the license. No, I soloed whatever it was, 8 hours they were supposed to be.
Do you remember what kind of an airplane?
Yep, I was in an Aranca.
Aranca.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you recall the sensation and what you were thinking at that time?
Yeah, I remember it really well because I thought it felt like the door was open. It was a side-by-side. And the feeling I had was that the door had blown off because it was so empty over on my right side. And that was my reaction to soloing. And after that, it was just automatic. You know how it was at the beginning. It's just like somebody else is flying the plane. It's so drilled into you.
Where was this? What town and state?
Pomona, California. I continued flying then from then on until the war. And then after the war started, I went into the WASPs.
Did you volunteer, and what process did it take?
Well, it was not all that hard. They had certain things. We had to be 21, and we had to be 5'4", and I was 5'3 3/4, and so I lied and said I was 5'4", but that's all right. They did never measure me, and we were never tested. Oh, I had to have 200 hours or more, preferably a commercial license.
Where did you report for flight training?
Texas, Sweetwater, Texas. Now that was a story in itself, because that was the beginning of a very, very strange experience about being in the service.
Tell us about it.
Well, it's pretty funny, because I went down there dressed up pretty nicely, and I had on a fur coat, and I took my tennis racket, got on American Airlines, and flew to El Paso, and then caught a train to Sweetwater. And I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I got. There was nobody there to meet us or help with the luggage or anything. And there was a bus, and there were, I don't know, maybe a dozen of us that got off of that particular train that particular day. And they going out to the airport or the base from the railroad station at Sweetwater. So we went out there, and the next thing I knew, they were piling sheets and towels and blankets on top of my arms and my purse and my tennis racket, and I was headed for my room, which was, they called it a bay. There were bays. That's how they referred to them. those were something else too. We carried all the stuff and landed there. There were 8 of us to each bay, and then there were 2 bays and a big bathroom in between. So there were eight women on one side and 8 on the other, and needless to say, not nearly enough facilities to handle that many women. So we had quite a time getting used to that. It was very difficult, and I think we were all just stunned. I don't think anybody was prepared for what we met, because we were immediately in the service, and we marched everywhere we went, which was a shock in itself. And I had short legs, and it was hard to keep up with everybody, because a lot of the gals were tall.
Did you march like an
Yes.
army troop?
Absolutely. They say fall in, and they say that means march, was it 2 abreast? I think so. In a line, we'd march that way to our meals, and everywhere we went, we were marching. So, and then they issued uniforms too, and that was something else, because they didn't have any women's clothing. We had to wear all the men's discards. Though they had started separating the men out of the base and onto, I don't know where they sent them. They were changing over to, Jackie Cochran was the one that got the women into this, and talked to some military person was in Washington, but anyway, they got this program started, and we were able to fly. And at that time, we all thought that everybody was going to be in the service, and I didn't want to go in the waves or anything like that, and so it was an opportunity for me to.
So you were there before Jackie Cochran got it formed as a group, or a
No, she formed it. There was a class before me.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how many were in it. They were in a different section. They eventually moved all of the men out, so then it was a woman's facility, a woman's base.
What was your official name?
We didn't have
WASP, or you
WASP.
didn't have
WASP. But I'll tell you the truth, I don't remember what it stands for. Women's Auxiliary something. Service pilot. That sounds about right. That's probably what it was.
All right. When you started then your training, how did that go? What was the process?
Well, ground school, and more ground school. And then we started in with the primary trainers. And I believe we decided that they might have been interstate. Yeah, interstate. And then we progressed to the AT-6s. And then we were checked out in P-51s. And that's as far as I got. I didn't go any further. And we delivered some planes around mostly. Dallas was kind of a headquarters. I really can't tell you. There's so much I can't remember. But I remember going in and out of Dallas and getting assignments, different places. Remember, I went to Homestead, Florida, and a couple of other places. We didn't go overseas.
So you think you picked up most of the airplanes at Dallas and then flew them to a destination?
That's my memory. Yeah, as best I can recall. That's what. And then, or sometimes we would pick up another plane, take it someplace else.
And you flew any of these planes that you had checked out?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where the other bases were for the Ferry Command for women, or even if there was another one. I don't know. I know there's a lot of them around because they have meetings over here at Camarillo with the, what are these, 99ers? They're over there every so often.
Was Jackie on the base when you were there? Or
Oh,
did
she would,
come and go?
she would come in occasionally, and we would all get very excited. We were always admired her tremendously. And was there a Dove? Was there a woman pilot and somebody Dove? She was very instrumental in early women's flying. I can't recall.
I can't recall the lady's name. There was another lady that had kind of started this deal, and then Jackie, through General Arnold, got it
Was Arnold, General Arnold.
sanctioned by the
Yes.
military.
Yes. Well, you know more about it than I do, because I don't remember that. But it was a very fascinating experience, and it was a extremely revealing, because I don't think that if a person hadn't been in the service, they would have any idea of what it was like. They would, blow reveille. I think it was reveille in the morning, and you were up and out there, and you had to wear these old broken down clothes, and of course the pant legs, they had belonged to some fellow, and I got the smallest size they had, but I had to roll them up at the bottom 3 times. I remember that, in order to walk in them. And we marched incessantly. We just marched. That was part of the deal. And my pants kept unrolling, and every time I'd take 2 or 3 steps, my pants would start unrolling, and I'd have to stop. Yeah, there were some very funny things that happened. It was a very unusual experience. The flying was fun. It was a shock to be in any kind of aircraft. I like the military craft.
Were there men pilots on the base at the same time?
Yes, for the first, they were there for the first class of women. We were the second, and by the time I left, the men were all gone. So by that time it was all women, to my knowledge.
How long was your training period? How
Oh.
long were you at Sweetwater?
About a year, I think. Yeah, pretty close to a year. And we were. It seemed to me that there was so much wasted time. I'm sure that it wasn't wasted. I thought it was. Because we had been through an awful lot of it in order to get our licenses that we'd already obtained. It was a lot of repetition. And the girls weren't happy until they finally got into the air and started doing what they were there to do.
How much flying time did you get?
I don't have my logbook anymore. I don't know. I had 200, 300. I probably had. I had over 200 hours, but I don't remember when. I mean, how many? And I suppose maybe another 100, 150 maybe.
When you were taking your training and going through ground school and checkouts in the planes, were the instructors in any way prejudiced against a woman pilot?
I think all of them were. Mm-hmm. There may have been some nice ones, but we didn't hear any kind words about them from any of the gals. It was strictly business. I mean, there was no. They acted like they wanted us to know, and repeatedly said that, they weren't going to have any crybabies around or any, that we were in the service, and for us not to forget it, as if we could.
Were you in the ferry all during the war or just part of the war?
No, just was part of the war.
Mhm.
No, and that's about all I can tell you about it. Just silly things that happened, the timing, the meals, things like that have nothing to do with flying. Those are the things I remember more than the flying.
The bad food and.
The food that came on a tray, all slopped together.
What was,
Everything was on a tray thing.
what was your favorite airplane to fly?
Oh, the P-51.
Why?
Oh, well, it just goes. It's just almost scary. You know, the first time you get in there.
Easy to handle?
Oh, yeah. They're sensitive. And they had the trainers there because they had jump seats built in. Or I guess you'd call them a jump seat for the instructors. We didn't just get in and fly them. We had some training in it, people flying with us before they let us go.
And when you ferried the airplane from base to base, were you alone or were there two pilots together?
No, one. It
Just
was a
one.
single place. It was just a fighter pilot. I mean, a fighter plane.
Did you usually fly out in pairs, 2 or 3 airplanes,
No.
or just single?
No, just whenever. Yeah, whenever something had to go, it went with whoever was available. And there seemed to be a lot of planes to move around. Because from that time on, then I came back to California and stayed through the end of the war. My husband was still he was still ferrying planes, and they were busy. And of course they ended up overseas and up in Alaska and delivering the planes to the Russians at that time. They were our give me a word.
Allies?
Thank you, allies.
Was he ferrying the fighters into Fairbanks where the
At that
Russians took them
time,
up?
they took. There was one that they all hated, and it was a scare. Was there a P-36?
P-39.
P-39. Yeah, that's what they took up there.
Yeah, the Lend-Lease gave the Russians P-39s. They delivered them to Fairbanks.
That's
and
right.
They
Yeah,
built
out
a
of Great
runway.
Falls.
Built a runway at Galena and at Nome that was all in line, so
Yeah.
the Russians didn't have to make a turn. They could pick the airplane up, and once they got it to Russia, then whatever happened to it happened. But,
I know there were the first time that my husband went up there on one of those. There were about 8 of them that were chosen to. I guess I don't know whether that was an honor or whether they were putting them down. At any rate, they really had their hands full. The weather up there was very strange. And they left from Great Falls, Montana. And these are all old stories to you, I'm sure. I mean, you're probably
they're
there.
still fun to listen to.
Yeah, is it? Well, that's about it. Except it was a wonderful experience. I'll never forget it, of course. But I forget details.
What was your most exciting flight experience?
Well, it wasn't in the Air Force. We weren't in the Air Force, actually. We were,
Was this before or after the war?
before.
Uh-huh.
I had a dead stick landing. Scared me to death.
In what?
I think I was in a Stinson then. And I was taking something down to Santa Ana when it was Santa Ana Airport. And I was in the flight pattern coming in to land. And for no reason, all of a sudden I looked out and there's this propeller looking at me. Just scared me to death. And of course I had to cut in front of, well, it wasn't that crowded. you know, not like the airports are now. But I knew I couldn't make any mistakes. There was no way. And yeah, that's probably the scariest.
What were you thinking while this was going on?
I don't remember. I'm just trying to get down. I wanted to hit the end of the runway. I didn't want to hit it short. I mean, come in short. I remember that. The airports weren't long like they are now. So where I was flying in those days, there was, you know, our runways were little.
Well, even the old Mines Field wasn't a very big airport.
No, it wasn't. I used to go into Mines Field. I mostly did this stuff for the business and go into Grand Central. It was at the time in Glendale. That's where we went for parts.
And that was a short runway.
Yeah. And I do remember I did get scared another time. I got behind an airliner, and it threw me around. I had a hard time trying to keep it straight, keep it, you know, so I could fly it.
Had you had any training in aerobatics?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And that was kind of scary too, now that you mention it, because my legs were short, and we had a Ryan ST, which was a low wing, and that was the training plane that we used for the aerobatics secondary program. And when we would do slow rolls, as soon as whenever we'd get upside down, I had cushions behind me and under me, so I could reach the rudders, and there was some space, probably no more than a couple of inches, but every time I'd get over, I'd drop, and it just that little tiny drop, I go, I think it felt like I was falling out of the skies. Those are, I don't know. I don't remember too many scares. I had one time coming back from Palm Springs, I had the engine stopped, and I had a girlfriend with me. We went out there for lunch, and we came through that pass, and it was rough. It was usually rough out there, and it was rougher than usual, and I don't know what it was. I suppose the gasoline probably came out of the carburetor, or something happened. The engine stopped. And so I started down. I was up really high because the floor of that pass is, I think, 3,000 feet. And so I was, quite a few thousand feet above that. I had lots of room. And I started down, and in just a few minutes it started windmilling and picked up and coughed a couple of times. And we came on in.
Probably
Came home.
ice.
What?
Probably ice.
Ice? Oh, maybe, I don't know. Something did something to it. But I didn't have a lot of time at that time. In fact, I think I'd just gotten my private license. And I took my father. My father was my first passenger. And he held on like this. He was terrified. My mother was more frightened than that. She didn't go for a while. She wouldn't go up with me at all for a while. She got over that. But they weren't all thrilled. I think they were frightened.
So your parents were not pilots?
No, my father was a doctor. My mother was a housewife. And
Now you have a son that's a retired airline pilot.
Yes. Yeah, lives in Hawaii.
Did your husband teach him to fly, or did the boy just grow up in an airplane?
Well, he grew up with his father in an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he took him all the way. And he had extremely good grades, and he had several colleges that he could attend on scholarships, and so he finished high school when he was 15, And so he went off to Pomona College, which was close to where we lived, for a long time. We had a friend who was a friend of my husband's, but who was my age. I was quite a bit younger than my husband. And this fellow had been flying for Hawaiian Airlines, and we were over in the islands at the time visiting, and my son became fairly well acquainted with our friend, and our friend, knew the head pilot for Hawaiian, and they gave him his, what would he need, a transport license, I suppose.
ATR.
Yeah. And so he flew for Hawaiian Airlines. That was his first job. And then he heard that Pan American was going to be hiring, and I don't know how he ever found that out. And he was just barely old enough, 23. And he went with Pan American. And he was with them until shortly after Lockerbie, when they folded. But he's been with the airlines ever since. An old man now. Old, nice, happy, retired. I guess that's all I can say. I don't have anything more.